Hi everybody, and welcome to my channel. And here is some more James Bond trivia. This time, Moonraker. The scene in which the gondola converts into an hovercraft and elevates out of the water succeeded with the 5th attempt. During the first 4 takes, the vehicle was so unstable that Sir Roger Moore fell into the water, and he needed to have his silk suit replaced for each take. It was fortunate that the stunt worked during the 5th take because he was wearing the last available silk suit. The cost of this movie was 30 million, nearly as much as the first 8 combined, without taking in account for inflation. The cable the Jaws bit was actually made of licorice. Producer Howard R. Broccoli complained that Maurice Bender title season cost more than the entire budget of Dr. No. This was the highest grossing Bond movie until the release of GoldenEye. The opening sequence concludes with Jaws free falling into a circus big top which came crashing down around him. Footage was shot of Richard Keel struggling out of the wreckage, but has this now been lost. A few stills from the scene were shown in a DVD extra. Jaws was supposed to be Bond's arch nemesis in this new movie until director Lewis Gilbert started paying attention to some of the fan mail he was getting from small children, asking why he couldn't be a goodie instead of a baddie. Bernard Lee's final appearance as M, the actor, died when For Your Eyes Only was in pre-production. The fight between James Bond and Chang, this movie has the largest amount of breakaway sugar glass used in a single scene. During the cable car stunt high above Rio de Janeiro, a real cliffhanger moment occurred when stuntman Richard Graydon slipped and was hanging on for dear life. The rest of the crew, including Ken Adam, was petrified when the camera was rolling, and I was watching from a vantage point. Sir Roger Moore arrived a few days late for the shoot in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, to a kidney stone attack in France. Moore also had a renal clinic attack while filming Live and Let Die. Once he arrived in Rio de Janeiro, he literally walked off the plane, went into makeup and hair, got fitted and went back onto the plane, and then filming arriving in Rio de Janeiro for the James Bond for this movie. Despite the previous movie telling that James Bond will return for Your Eyes Only, producer Howard R. Broccoli chose this movie's next instalment after the success of Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. In the novel, Ian Fleming stated that when Bond reaches age 45, it will be automatically taken off the 00 list and given a staff job at headquarters. The title song, sung by Dame Shirley Bassey, the last time she did it in the Bond film franchise. The other were Goldfinger and Diamonds Are Forever. She also sang a version of Miss Kiss Kiss Bang Bang for Thunderball. The only time Bond fires a gun in this movie is when he shoots at the tree. It was the first movie to feature a modern space in a movie. The movie's release was supposed to conclude with the first launch of the space shuttle, but unfortunately didn't occur until April the 12th, 1981, before the release of the next James Bond film, For Your Eyes Only. During the scene set in Venice, Pope John Paul I died. Filming was suspended for the day, partly because the bells were ringing in Venice mourning his death. Barbara Brock was originally scheduled to make a brief appearance as Anya in the Spy Along, but the idea was only dropped a few weeks before filming began, according to the book. So Roger Moore's taste at shooting scenes is quite genuine. His autobiography expressed extreme dislike for blood sports and a reticence about guns. So Roger Moore enjoyed filming in Paris because production didn't start until noon, and the hours were short, 8 hours a day on the movie in the time limit could work in France. While certainly not the movie which was not a shame, Sir Roger Moore made fun of himself in the movie and the absurdity of the plot. Louis Charles had originally been offered the role of Anya in The Spy Who Loved Me, but turned it down. The part was decided to take temporary retirement. She got the role of Holly Goodhead by a chance, which was given the seat next to Dira Louise Gilbert on a flight. Real lasers was used in the sorting and creation of the special effects in the movie. Because of the wild stunts they were allowed to shoot in Venice, producer Albert R. Broccoli donated money to save Venice Fund. Richard Kiel is the only henchman to appear in 2 Bond films. Final James Bond movie to date to feature John Barry's second signature James Bond film, the 007 theme, and the only Sir Roger Moore Bond movie it wasn't heard. Bond stunt double and veteran skydiver Jack Lombard bore a strong resemblance to Sir Roger Moore after he was persuaded to cut his long hair and shave off his equally long beard. In addition to being offered the chance to perform the title song, Frank Sinatra was offered the role of Hugo Drax. Yeah, well, that would have been something, wouldn't it, to see Frank Sinatra playing in a James Bond film. I don't know how much it would have cost him. All of the Space Center scenes were shot in the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. While the Ministry of Defense and M arrive in Venice, the minister mentions he plays bridge with Drax. It's a reference to the original novel, in which the character Drax introduces a card cheat who constantly wins by playing bridge at his favourite club. While shooting moved to Janeiro, the Brazilian authorities wanted more money. As a result, the cable car scene was almost cut from the movie. The movie utilised the largest set ever built in France. Sir Roger Moore believed to have conducted approximately 390 interviews for the promotion of this movie. In the original novel, Ian Fleming described Drax as a Lansdowne figure. 24 years later, James Mason, Stu Granger, and Lewis Jordan rejected the part. Drax was in the movie by Marco Lansdowne. For a while, the movie was tied with Octopussy. The World Is Not Enough to have the most reprise roles 7 of any James Bond movie. Adapting to different work ethics in France, production designer Ken Adam was informed by the union leader of the crew will not work overtime, and Adam could not record even when Bond movie decided not to include overtime as part of the construction crew to complete the interiors. During shooting, Lewis Charles' brother Clay was diagnosed with Hopkinson's disease. After filming Wrapped, she returned to a native Houston to donate to him every 10 days. One of the Moonraker space shuttle models used in filming is currently displayed in the Las Vegas Planet Hollywood restaurant. When Frank Sinatra was approached to sing the theme song, it was called Think of Me, and that of the music composed by John Barry and then lyrics by Paul Williams. After he turned it down, Barry now wrote Moonraker for Johnny Matthews, who chose to sing it when he decided that it wasn't working. Barry had a chance meeting with Shirley Bassey, and with the approval of Howard R. Broccoli, she recorded the song. This movie was filmed on 3 continents, in 4 studios across 7 countries. The reason this movie has little in common with a novel is that the book was deemed far too dated to be adopted in 1979. So Roger Moore was off the production for a week in hospital as he had kidney stone. At one point, he realised production would have to shut down due to Moore's affection. Although everybody remembers Dolly wearing the braces in the scenes when she meets George for the first time, she doesn't wear braces at all. The boat chase in Venice was slightly hampered by the fact that speed restrictions in the city were 5 knots. Bond does not drive a car in this movie. He's seen, however, briefly driving the vehicle through some of the caves, location. The only Bond movie when James Bond is not driving a motor vehicle. Bond's fight with Chang took place in a museum filled with precious artifact glass, which meant over 600 pieces would be smashed. One of the longest film punch-ups since John Wayne fought Victor McClure in The Quiet Man. The painting of James Bond shoots with a wrist-activated dart is that of King William III of England. Moonraker was the 3rd James Bond novel by Ian Fleming, and it was published on April the 7th, 1955. The fight scene between James Bond and Chang in the showroom was originally intended to be in the previous James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. Lewis Charles had trouble with the dialogue during the climax, so the prop department put a martini doll outside the window of the space pod, wishing after that she realised she finished the scene. Tom Malkovich wrote a script for the movie which was not used. Apparently, sections of it ended up in Octopussy. About 50 sets were constructed for the movie. 3 Spear space stations, the biggest ever constructed. According to Tom Malkovich, there was a scene featuring Drox meeting his co-financer, the Amazon Leia. They used the room lock just below the space shuttle launch pad, which Bond and Holly later escapes. The scene was shot, but later edited out. Michael Lansden and Richard Keel reprised their respective roles of Hugo Drax and George in the video game. This is the only film version of the film novel Moonraker that was in a plan in 1956, but it comes as nothing as was reported to have been discovered in 2004. But as it was an April Fool's Day hoax in the joke, so Derek Bogard was James Bond, Orson Welles was Hugo Drax, and Peter Lorre was an henchman. Since new tax laws were announced in Great Britain, producer Albert R. Broccoli decided not to use the 007 stage, which had just been erected for the spy robbery. Instead, the interiors by Ken Adam was filmed on 3 sounds in France. Footage of the carnival in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, was shot in January 1978. The shots where Sir Roger Moore was done in February 1979. The score also marked a turning point in John Barry's output, abandoning of the earlier Bond scores, instead scoring his movie with rich, strong passages. M's set office was originally at Pinewood Studios and was transported to Paris for shooting. Kate Bush was reportedly considered to sing the theme, but it turned it down. The last film to feature John Barry's 007 film had been previously used from Rush with Love, Thunderbolt on the Ice, and Diamonds Are Forever. Jacqueline Smith was originally cast as Dr. Holly Goodwood, but declined due to scheduling conflicts with Charlie's Angels. An asteroid was named after James Bond on October the 5th, 1983. According to the soundtrack sleeves note, the soundtrack album debuted on the US charts on August the 18th, 1979, where it peaked at number 159 spot. The soundtrack had never been extended release, was the tracks like other Bond soundtracks, apparently due to the masters being lost in France. Final time to date that a James Bond film have been seen hang gliding, very popular in new activity in the 1970s. Sir Roger Moore is the only actor to play James Bond to be seen hang gliding. The other time was in Live and Let Die. The second of 3 James Bond movies where Bond's mission takes him to Italy, in this case Venice. 11 James Bond movies at the film franchise, and the 4th film to star Roger Moore as Bond. Earlier script and storyboards for the movie reveal another character who was dropped in the movie, a sidekick villain henchman called Rataz, who was involved in a cable sequence with Jaws. So Roger Moore's face was quite bruised after hanging burst of air pumped onto in the scene where gravity spins out of control. The air burst affects him to this movie called a Moonraker. This is the only James Bond film to date to have 2 boat chases. There is Bondalena and Gone film that accuse either for a boat chase. The same year, Walter Gottlieb appeared in Cuba in 1979 with former James Bond to Sean Connery. Connery and Gottlieb appeared from Russia with Love. The space scene was done by rewinding the camera after the element was shot. Ernst Silver Stavro Blofeld was one of the recurring villains of the official James Bond film franchise. The two henchmen are Jaws from The Spy and this movie Mr. White from Spectre. The world premiere was supposed to be held in Houston, Texas. However, problems with the launch of the space shuttle to Columbia forced a change of a venue to London, England. The royal premiere was held on June 26, 1979 at London's Odeon, Leicester. It was considered for a while the movie would follow on Her Majesty's Secret Service. However, it turned out to be Diamonds Are Forever. Before he orders her and Bond to be executed, Drax tells Ollie, "Your desire to become first woman in space will shortly be fulfilled." Second successive Bond movie where Bond escapes death in pre-titles with the help of a parachute. The music for this movie was recorded in April 1979. Considered by many to be a remake of The Spy Who Loved Me, as both very similar stories. Similarities including a vehicle being stolen, a pre-title sequence involving an aerial stunt, and the main villain killing a female employee for selling or telling secrets. The final 007 movie that Richard Mulbane didn't write or co-write in his life. The other two were You Only Live Twice and Live and Let Die. The movie opens with a scene showing a NASA space shuttle after a briefing MI6 in London. The next scene involves Bond on a small private jet. The original novel was used in screenplays of Diamonds Are Forever and GoldenEye and Die Another Day. The music composed by John Barry and co-wrote the theme song which had previously worked on the following James Bond movies: Dr. No. Theme song and composer of the score: Thunderball, and co-wrote of the theme song and composer of the score You Only Live Twice. Identical sound effects during the space battle, such as twisting metal, ringing noises, yelling, and computer equipment used in the movie and The Spy Who Loved Me. Overspending for this film was so high that the producer was still paying interest when License to Kill was 1989 was produced. In The Day of the Jackal, Michael Landon plays a secret agent trying to a British assassin armed with an high-powered rifle. He using an assassin with an eye tried to kill British secret agent. Identically, Roger Moore wanted to play the Jackal. Although James Bond conquers space in this movie, it's not the only James Bond movie to deal with story elements dealing with outer space. Dr. No, You Only Live Twice, and Diamonds Are Forever at GoldenEye. Shot in California by Don Clavel under the supervision of Second Unit Director John Glenn, the skydiving sequence took an immense amount of planning and collaboration with skydivers. A treacherous pilot who uses parachute bond seals and stunt aerial double. Draws from the Bond movies The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker is a character in the later James Bond video games. Nightfire. Well, that's the end of my James Bond Moonraker trivia. Like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all again in another one.